Hello darts fans, as Timo Newman here, the transporter. Welcome to the good ship Undarted Waters and the final video on this voyage of is darts biased against left-handers? Yes, of course it is. Right, today though, in this last video, we're going to talk about what can we do about it, what are the remedies. Here's a possible remedy. Do you like my new dartboard? It's a left-hander's dartboard and I just got a Shanghai on the 8s. Perfect. Quite comfortable that for a left-hander. Right, let me get my whiteboard. I'm very aware that the videos in this series have been quite long, longer than usual, so please give me your feedback on that, okay? It's quite a big topic, and so each segment has needed a lot of proper discussion. So I can chop these videos up on future series to make them shorter, but please give me feedback. But what I will be doing for every series I've done is a short summary video for those people that don't have the time, quite understandably, to watch all of this. But they will miss out on all of the, the important discussion. But in any case, brief recap of the first 3 videos. First video, we asked the question, is darts statistically biased against left-handers? The clear answer was yes. Let me talk about Elite A and Elite B. So Elite A, world champions, and also maybe like top 32 in the PDC, that kind of level. We found massive underrepresentation of left-handers. There's never been a left-hander in a final of a world championship at the BDO unified PDC level, okay? But then if we look at Elite B, which would be the BDO World Championship finals after the split, or the next level down from the top 32, 33 to 64, say, in the PDC rankings. Normal representation of left-handers, as 1 in 10 people are, on average, are left-handed, and we found that normal representation at that Elite B level. I'm going to come back to that briefly in this video and explain why I think that is, okay? Video 2. Why is there this strong bias? Could that be because of human beings, that if you're left-handed you're just not able to play darts? Well, we looked at all sorts of things about differences of symmetry within human beings, to do with handedness, to do with dominant eye, and so on and so forth, and we did not find any smoking guns there at all. In fact, in combat sports, which often require very good eye-hand coordination, there's an overrepresentation of left-handed people. Left-handers clearly have the basic human skills for the game. We looked at snooker, which is not a combat sport in the sense you don't have 2 opposing players at the same time, and the equipment and the environment in snooker is symmetric, and we found there normal representation of left-handers in snooker. So there's clearly an issue in darts. The clear smoking gun we talked about in video 3 is broken symmetry or a bias towards right-handers in the environment and in the board itself. So in the environment, yesterday in the video we talked about the placement of the referee in the eye line more for the left-hander, and the Oki walk massively favouring right-handed players because of what I talked about, the jig that a left-handed player has to do if they use their helping hand to retrieve their darts. Something they would not be doing generally in practice. And we also talked, probably the most important thing is the board, which is clearly asymmetric. I flipped mine for a joke today, okay? Maybe it's not a joke though, we'll see later on. But we talked about the medial and the lateral kind of throwing. Medial is more comfortable, and for a right-hander, well, on a proper board, not that one, but the double 16, double 8, which is the favoured route for outshots, is on the comfortable medial side for right-handers, but it's on the lateral side for left-handers, which is a significant disadvantage. James Wade has hacked many of those things, which is why he's really the sole representative of left-handers at the Elite A level. Okay, so that was our recap of the last 3 videos. What am I going to do today? I'm going to briefly try and explain why we see the Elite A being essentially bereft of left-handers, whereas Elite B has normal representation. I've got a simple explanation for that, and then I'm going to talk about what we're going to do What should we do about this? Alright, so let's just remove the recap. And I think you'll like this argument about why Elite B and all the other levels probably lower down in darts have a reasonable representation of left-handers, but the top level does not. Okay? So this is just a very quick argument. Okay. So let's, for the sake of argument, let's imagine we took all of darts and separated it into levels. Let me talk about elite levels. And I want to say A, B, C, and D. And these would be in groups of 32. So this would be the top 32 players in the PDC. This would be 33 to 64. This would be 65 to whatever that is. Is that 96, is it? And then this would be going up to 128, okay? And let's look at the total number of players in each of these bands, okay? So obviously from what I've just said, you would have 32 players in each band. Now, if darts was a game with no bias towards left-handers, then on average, for your left-handers, you would expect to find, on average, 3 players at every level, on average. Of course, it's small number statistics, but on average, you'd expect to find that. So at the Elite A level, you've got your 3 left-handers on average, and B, I'm doing them in different colours for a reason you'll see in a minute, C and D. So on average, that's what darts looks like if there's no bias against left-handers. Now what we're finding though is that really the sole representation at the Elite A level is James Wade, who has never been in a final of a World Championship, but he's been knocking on the door of that for years and years and years, and he is currently in the world top 10. So how can we explain this? Whereas at the levels below, like in the BDO World Championship, you have those amazing players like Mark Webster and Les Wallace. And if you look at level B, currently in the PDC, we have 3 left-handed players, Mickey Mansell, Neil Zonnefeld and Ryan Meikle. Here's how we could explain this. If there was an intrinsic bias against left-handers, which I think there is, a player of a given level will not be playing at the level, a left-handed player will not be playing with their peers. They'll always be playing against players who are slightly weaker, but they're being artificially suppressed because of the environment and the board, okay? So that means that these two or three of these get pushed down, okay? Let's say roughly the bias is strong, and let's say 2 out of 3 players get pushed down. So 2 of these get pushed down, 2 of these get pushed down. So now in this elite level D, you've got 1 left-handed player who is probably at that level, and you've got 2 who are at the level above, but because of the bias they've been pushed down. And same at this level B. So you've got 2 world top 64 players who are not in the world top 64 as left-handers because of the bias. And finally, at the elite level, 2 of these get pushed down. And it's again because they're good enough to play at that level, but the environmental bias is artificially suppressing them, okay? Because only a few percentage points of results will separate these 4 layers. It's only small effects that add up to do this. And so and then this is what you would expect to find then. So basically, if 2 out of 3 left-handed players are being pushed down to 1 level below where they should be, you would find this pattern, which is actually what we see. There's James Wade who survives there because he has hacked these biases. He doesn't do the jig on his Oki walk, and he basically is called the machine because he has perfected the double 20, double 10 route, ignoring essentially the conventional double 16, double 8. So he has intuitively and intellectually figured out how to hack darts and survive as a left-handed player at the top level. But that would mean that amongst Ryan Meikle, Niels Zonneveld and Mickey Mansell, 2 of those belong in the top 32. All right, and it would probably be Mickey Mansell and Niels Zonneveld because they're in the 40s. Ryan Meikle's down in the 60s, okay? So this pattern, but you can't see the colors, you see. We don't see the colors. There's no label on a left-handed player saying, I've been pushed down from where I should be because of the biased sport that I play. But we can understand from this theoretical hypothesis that that's what you would see. So what we see can be explained by this idea. Right, so that's pretty cool, I think. But let's go now to the main point of this video, which will not take very long to discuss, and it's really about what should we do. Okay. So I want to talk about remedies, because it's so, you know, it's one thing to complain and whatnot, but you've got to, you know, in life you've got to be positive. You've got to find solutions to problems. Can't just complain about them. So what's the remedy? Okay, so the first thing we have to ask ourselves is, do we care enough in darts that we should even solve this problem? We recognize that there is a strong bias against left-handers. Do we care? You might argue, well, look, in combat sports, left-handers have an advantage because of the training asymmetry that we talked about. So you see a big overrepresentation of left-handers in combat sports and in racket sports. So maybe left-handers have got it easy there. Maybe they should have it hard in darts, and darts is just a right-hander's game. So that's one position you could take. I would say that's a bad position, and the reason is, what other sport do we have that's a solo sport where the environment and the equipment is so obviously biased, so asymmetric? Okay, it's a really unusual situation. It's an asymmetric sport in terms of the environment and the equipment, right? So that's one position, though, is that should we care? I think we should care. I think the PDC and the governing bodies need to look at this very, very closely. Okay, so what would be the ways that we go about this? I think the 2 factors that we've discovered are the environment and the equipment. So these are the 2 things we have to address. So how do we remedy the environment issues? The main ones that we sort of talked about was the ref placement and also the Oki walk. I know it sounds a bit silly, this Oki walk, but I think it's a big deal actually. The fact that left-handed players have to do a jig every time they retrieve their darts, and they have to do something different that they do for thousands of hours in practice, that's wrong. And that is a percentage bias that will hurt them. Okay? So, discussion really, I don't have solutions to these explicitly, but should the ref change sides when a left-handed player comes up to throw? Obviously that's a bit awkward and it's a bit distracting. Should there be 2 refs, one on either side, when a left-hander is playing, so that neither player sees a bias? But of course that's going to be awkward for right-handed players. One principle that we must follow, I think, in Remedy is we mustn't change the game for right-handed players, because that wouldn't be darts anymore. So we mustn't change the game for right-handed players. I really think that's a strong foundational principle for Remedies. So is there a way that we can think about ref placement that would not hurt right-handers, but which would even things up for left-handers? The Oki walk for me is a critical one. We have to allow left-handed players, if they wish, optionally, to walk back the other way. And if right-handed players want to do that too, fine. But there has to be the option for left-handed players to walk back the natural way without doing a dance every time they retrieve their darts, okay? And then with equipment, this is probably the most important thing of all now, to be honest. You know, if I had to weight the importance of these things, I'd say the asymmetry of the board is the main problem, the jig retrieving darts is the second problem, and then the ref placement is the third problem, okay? But this is the most important one. It's the fact that the board is asymmetric, and because there's a comfort on the medial side, left-handers are probably more comfortable naturally, maybe not after thousands of hours of training, but intrinsically they're more comfortable probably on the right-hand side of the board. So it's only fair for left-handers to have the gorgeous gold of double 16 and double 8 on that side of the board for them, because right-handers get that advantage every time they're doing outshots on that medial side for them. All right, so I think we have to think about the mirror board. Again, you might say, well, just use an opposite sided board 1 in 10 times because there's 1 in 10 left-handers, but that is absolutely not going to work. Okay, because left-handers are still primarily playing on a board that's wrong for them, and right-handers are still primarily playing on boards that are good for them. So it has to be that the board suits the player who's actually throwing the darts. So my suggestion would be looking at the dartboard manufacturers. Can they come up with a board with an electronic numbering of just labeling of the segments that can be flipped just at a push of a button? So if left-handed players wish to play on a mirror board when it's their turn to throw, they can. And it would take a while for refs to get used to counting on that, but it wouldn't be too difficult, I think. And I flipped my board today for a bit of fun. I actually found it, I've never done it before, I found it quite pleasant as a left-handed player to be going for 8s and 16s down on that medial side. So there we go. That's this series on is Bart's Dice against left-handers. Yes, it bloomin' well is, but there are things we can do about it, and I think a very serious discussion should be had about making this game fairer for all players, all right, left and right-handed alike. So with that, thank you ever so much for those who've watched these very long videos on this topic. Well done. Great stamina. I really appreciate that, but please do send me feedback. I can chop videos up into shorter segments, but then you get very lengthy series, and maybe that's not so attractive either. But I'm going to take a few days break now to do some gardening and other chores, but I'll come back with some more exciting stuff. I think we're going to be talking about tips and technique. We're going to get back on the dartboard more, less whiteboard, okay? And there'll be shorter videos, more digestible. So until then, my friends, 3 darts at the oche, and I'll see you next time.